One morning, a fare appeared on the transatlantic route that made no sense, a seat across an entire ocean for less than a train ticket to the coast. Passengers cheered. Analysts frowned. And two of the most powerful men in aviation stared at each other across the water, each knowing the same terrifying truth, that every one of those passengers was flying at a loss, and neither man could afford to be the first to raise the price. This is a story about arithmetic, not ambition. About two empires that agreed, silently, to bleed each other white until one collapsed. One of them was already dead the day the war began. He just didn't know it yet. Keep watching, because the number that killed him wasn't on any ticket. To understand the slaughter, you have to understand the prize. The North Atlantic Run, the sky bridge between Europe and America, was the richest air route on Earth. Whoever owned it owned the business traveler, the immigrant, the tourist boom, and the prestige that came with carrying a nation's flag across the sea. For decades, it had been carved up politely by government treaties. Fares were fixed. Everyone made money. It was a cartel dressed in the language of diplomacy, and it was comfortable. Then came a man who despised comfort, a magnate who looked at that cozy arrangement and saw not order but a fat, lazy target. He believed the ocean should belong to whoever dared price it lowest. That belief would cost him everything. He was the sort of man who wore his ambition like a tailored suit, precise, expensive, impossible to ignore. He had built his fortune not on airplanes, but on the conviction that ordinary people were being robbed. Flying, he insisted, was priced like a luxury only because a club of established carriers had agreed to keep it that way. So he arrived at the ocean's edge with a single devastating idea. What if a seat across the Atlantic cost a fraction of the going rate? No frills, no banquets, no reserved comfort. Just a body, a seat, and a destination. The incumbents laughed. They had laughed at outsiders before. This one, they assumed, would run out of money long before he ran out of nerve. For a while, the strategy looked like genius. His cheap seats filled instantly. Lines snaked through terminals. Newspapers celebrated the man who had democratized the sky. His load factors, the percentage of seats actually filled, soared past his rivals. And here is the first thing the giants misunderstood. A discount airline doesn't need to beat its enemy's price by a little. It needs to be so cheap that flying becomes an impulse, a thing people do because they can, not because they planned to. He wasn't stealing the incumbents' passengers. He was manufacturing new ones out of thin air. For a brief, intoxicating season, it seemed the arithmetic of attrition might actually favor the challenger. But the giants were not asleep. They watched the challenger fill his planes and understood the danger with cold clarity. If he proved that cheap transatlantic flight worked, the entire fixed-price cartel would collapse and their fat margins would evaporate forever. So they did the only thing a wounded incumbent can do. They matched him. Not on every seat. That would have bankrupted them too. But on precisely the seats he sold, on precisely his routes, at precisely his times. They flooded his markets with fares priced to lose money, absorbing the pain with cash from every other route in their vast networks. This is the oldest weapon in monopoly warfare. Subsidize the battlefield with profits from 100 quiet victories elsewhere. Now, the brutal math revealed itself. The challenger had one weapon, low price, and a single ocean to defend. The giants had dozens of routes, deep reserves, and government treaties tilting subtly in their favor. When both sides sell below cost, The winner is not the smarter operator or the more beloved brand. The winner is whoever has the deepest reservoir of cash to burn. It is a contest measured not in cleverness, but in liters of blood. And the challenger, for all his brilliance, had built a company with almost no fat to burn. Every plane he added was leveraged. Every route he opened demanded more capital he didn't have. The giants were bleeding pints. He was bleeding out. Here is the original lesson buried in the wreckage. The thing few people grasp about price wars. A low-cost disruptor's greatest strength is also his fatal weakness. He has only one price to give. When your entire identity is cheapest, you cannot go lower without dying, and you cannot go higher without becoming your enemy. The incumbent, meanwhile, can lose money on one route and win on 9 others, playing a portfolio game the challenger cannot match. Disruption dies not when the giant out-innovates it, but when the giant simply agrees to lose money longer. Attrition is a rich man's weapon. And the man who started this war had mistaken the market's love for him for the market's willingness to keep him alive. The challenger, sensing the trap closing, did what desperate men do. He expanded faster. New routes, bigger planes, more cities. He reasoned that if he could grow large enough, quickly enough, the sheer scale would make him too dominant to kill. It was a gambler's logic. Double the bet to escape the loss. But each new route was another wound, another loss-making front. The giants were only too happy to match. He was not building an empire. He was widening the surface area of his own bleeding. Behind the scenes, his bankers grew quiet. The loans that had felt like fuel now felt like a noose. Every fare he sold, celebrated by the public, deepened a debt that no volume of passengers could ever repay. Then came the exchange rate knife, the number teased at the very start. His debts were denominated in a currency that was strengthening. His revenues came in currencies that were weakening. Every month, the same tickets bought fewer dollars while the same loans demanded more. It was a slow financial garrote no marketing genius could loosen. The public still adored him. Planes still flew full. From the outside, the empire looked triumphant right up to the final weeks. That is the cruelest feature of an attrition war. The loser often appears to be winning until the exact moment the cash runs dry. Popularity is not solvency, and the ocean does not care how many people love you if you cannot pay for the fuel. The end, when it came, arrived not with a dramatic collapse, but with a phone call from a lender. The credit was pulled. The planes were grounded. Passengers holding tickets to cross an ocean found the terminals dark and the counters empty. The man who had promised to democratize the sky became overnight the cautionary tale every executive would cite for a generation. His fleet was auctioned. His name became shorthand for hubris, and the giants, who had bled real money to kill him, quietly, gratefully, raised their fares back to where they had always been. The passengers who had cheered the cheap seats now paid more than ever. The war had been fought, ostensibly, on their behalf. They lost, too. But the giants' victory carried a hidden poison, and this is the second twist the arithmetic conceals. In killing the challenger, they had proven his point. Millions of people had now flown across the ocean who never would have dared before. The demand he unleashed did not die with his company. It sat there, dormant, hungry, waiting. A generation later, new disruptors, leaner, better capitalized, learning from his corpse, would return to the same ocean and win the war he had lost. He had been right about everything except one thing: timing and treasury. He arrived with the correct idea and the wrong balance sheet. Being early and being wrong, in the arithmetic of price wars, look identical from the outside until history sorts them. Consider what actually decided the outcome. Not vision, not courage, not customer love. The challenger had all three in abundance. What he lacked was the one thing that wins wars of attrition: the ability to lose money calmly, indefinitely, without flinching. The giants won because they had built businesses boring enough, diversified enough, and cash-rich enough to absorb years of deliberate losses. The disruptor lived quarter to quarter on borrowed nerve. In a knife fight, the flashier blade often loses to the one that simply refuses to fall. Every founder who has ever undercut a giant on price should study this ocean, because the seduction of "we'll just charge less" hides a brutal question. Less for how long, and paid for with whose money? So, who blinked? Neither in the way the word suggests. The challenger did not blink. He collapsed, eyes wide open, still convinced he was right. The giants did not blink either. They simply outlasted, then quietly returned to profit, having spent a fortune to preserve a system that couldn't survive forever anyway. The true winner was time. The idea he died for became the industry's future, minus his name on the door. That is the final uncomfortable arithmetic of the price war. The man who opens the market rarely gets to own it. He clears the runway with his own wreckage, and the next pilot lands where he crashed. Ambition writes the check. Someone else, always, cashes it. If this kind of story grips you, the cold mathematics behind empires that looked invincible right up until they weren't, then you belong here. On magnates and monopolies, we dig into the hostile takeovers, the boardroom coups, the price wars and cartels that shaped the modern world, and the ruthless men who fought them. Every week, we take one titan, one empire, one brutal contest, and trace it from the first bold gamble to the final reckoning. Subscribe and turn on notifications so the next collapse lands in your feed the moment it drops. Because somewhere right now, two giants are quietly bleeding each other over a market you use every day, and one of them already doesn't know he's finished. We'll be there when the number reveals which one.